Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. Today we are talking to Dave Roberts, who will be our expert on all things Burnley. Just before we get on to discussing the Clarets though, make sure to like, share and subscribe to your channel because we've got so much Premier League analysis going on at the moment. The season is coming up thick and fast. There's so many stories all the time and we are giving you the best experts to understand it all. But Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, as always, Jason, to speak to you. I know you've been on our podcast in the past, and it's always a pleasure to speak to you about the work that you do as well.
Yeah, no, Dave, it's I don't know if people will know because obviously I've kind of moved from my podcast to working for Ben now, and yeah, we kind of go back a few years, and we've kind of worked together on a few things. I love coming on the No Nay Never podcast, and I guess, yeah, tell us a little bit about the brilliant work you do as your Burnley statistorian. I love that kind of name that you got there, No Nay Never podcast, and all the Burnley stuff that you work on.
Yeah, well, the No Nay Never podcast, that's been going for a while now. That started back in 2013, so it was the 2013-14 season. Burnley were a championship side back then, and we got promoted the first season. I wasn't involved in the podcast at that stage. I came in a little bit late. I think this is my fourth full season, although I've done a few little bits and pieces in the past. I came in to try and give a different angle to it, try and do a bit of statty stuff and try and do previews. So we do now 2 podcasts a week. We do a pre-match preview. So we look back at the history of the fixture, the team we're playing, and then we look forward to what's going on with the tactics and the injuries as well and all that kind of thing, who the referee is going to be, and that kind of thing. And then we have an analysis show post-match afterwards, which I don't get directly involved in most of the time. There's a wider team that do that. And we've been going for, this is our 9th season, and they're still going strong, and it's good stuff. We enjoy it.
I mean, one of the things that I love about you is you get all these amazing, obscure bits of facts and data and you put them in. I can't remember when, obviously, I came on to discuss with you about Arsenal, but you had a really good one. I don't know if you've got just a random one off the top of your head that you can give the listeners today.
Oh, now you put me on the spot. What we try and do is, as you say, do that. We go back in history, so there'll be like a little thing from history. I mean, I go through and I kind of have a match database, and I like not just have the stats and the results, but some of the curious things as well. There was one, it wasn't an Arsenal one, it was a Newcastle one. It was a great one. It's going back up to about 1897, I think it was. And back then they used to have celebrities used to kick off the matches. So what they used to do, there was like a theatre in town, and there'd be a show on, and they'd actually get the star from the theatre show to kick off the match. And they did this, a match at Turf Moor. Newcastle came down, and whoever it was, a guy called Watty Walton was the name of the guy, kicked off the game, and then Burnley got the ball, went down the other end, and within 40 seconds they'd scored. So I think after that, the Football League kind of took a dim view of it and stopped that happening. But in the past, that had been something that happened. You can't believe that in this day and age that happened in a proper Football League match, but it did.
I suppose that's the 1800s kind of version of the little Audi ball being brought on, like we saw in Euro 2020. But let's focus on all things Burnley now. And starting off with last season, it wasn't one of the best, Dave. Are you finding it hard to get enthused about the season ahead, or can you find a few positives?
I think you always start, well, as supporters, you always tend to start a season as a blank slate, a new start, and you've got high hopes for the season. You everyone starts level, same number of points. We did have a poor start to last season, a really poor start. We had injury problems, particularly in defence. Ben Mee and James Tarkowski were injured, and we had to bring other players in, and that really put us on a difficult footing for the start of the season. Then we kind of pulled things together. We had a reasonably good middle part of the season, got ourselves away from the likes of Fulham and West Brom, got ourselves safe, and then towards the end of the season we had a poor run at the end as well. So it was a season in kind of 3/3, if you will, although not exactly the same number of games, but poor start, decent-ish middle that kind of got us out of any trouble, whereas in other seasons we might have struggled. And then at the end, kind of when we were safe, things tailed off a little bit in terms of performance. Plus, we missed Nick Pope at the end of the season; he was injured as well. So it was one of those. I think as well, we struggled at Turf Moor. We only had 4 wins at Turf Moor all season, so normally we rely on Turf Moor being a bit of a fortress. And it certainly wasn't that last season. I think we've gone 10 games now without a win at Turf Moor. So we'll be hoping when fans come back next season that we can cheer the team on and start getting some results at home. So we'll need to do better than that, much better than that this season if we're going to get ourselves away from those bottom few places.
Now, looking at the style of play with the teams, I kind of want to make this accessible for as many people as possible because, some people might be brand new to the Fantasy Premier League community. So how would you describe the tactics of the side for somebody who's not really watched Burnley before?
Well, Burnley are probably one of the teams that you know what you're going to get with them, basically. Sean Dyche is more often than not going to play a 4-4-2. He has played a sort of a 4-4-1-1, gone a little bit more defensive and pulled a player back a little bit. More often when we're playing maybe the top teams away from home, but maybe only 3-4 times a season, something like that. Most of the time it is a 4-4-2, and I don't foresee us changing to an expansive 4-3-3 or anything different for this season based on what we've seen in pre-season so far. So I think it is a case of what you see is what you get. It's a 4-4-2, pretty much low block, letting the opposition come onto you a little bit, but basically trying to channel the play into central positions and trying to get them to shoot from distance. So that has tended to work well for us in the past, more often than not, but it is kind of reliant on a very solid defensive unit, and we have more or less a fixed back 5, a goalkeeper and back 4 with 1 or 2 options within that, but that's pretty much how Burnley play. And then we don't score a lot of goals. It's not a case of we're going to score 50-60 goals a season, so we have to be resolute at the back and then make the most what we can going forward as well.
I mean, some people have looked at a change at the top of the hierarchy of the club. You've been bought out by an American group, but that hasn't translated into anything new in pre-season then.
Well, we made one signing. Well, we made a couple of signings. We've signed Nathan Collins. He came from Stoke. He's a central defender. I guess you could argue he's more of a like-for-like replacement with Ben Gibson. Ben Gibson obviously was playing on loan at Norwich last season. That's been converted to a permanent transfer. I think there was a clause in there when he went on a season-long loan. So that's more or less a like-for-like, although he's a younger player. We've got Wayne Hennessey in goalkeeper, experienced goalkeeper as cover, but then Bailey Peacock-Farrell, younger goalkeeper, he's gone out on loan to Sheffield Wednesday for the season. So we've not brought anyone else new in. We've lost the likes of Robbie Brady. He obviously had his injury problems, but he was one of the players who, on his day, certainly could create things for us. But yeah, we're still a few players short. I think there is time to go before the start of the season and a few weeks left in the transfer window. But you get the feeling we're going to probably need to get at least another 2 or 3 players in if we're going to try and push on and try and get some players who are going to improve the team. And it's a bit like Burnley. It tends to be late in the window when things happen. So again, it'll be a case of wait and see from that perspective.
Yeah, I think it is one to wait and see on because we're going to go into kind of analysis of last season and then kind of see if things will improve for this season. But before we get into that, I do want to say, I think that Sean Dyche should be kind of beatified or something because he does work miracles each season. He's so damn good as a manager. So when I'm kind of criticising things of the club, from my perspective, I'm not really criticising him. Quite often it seems to me that he's working such wonders with quite often a thin squad. Like you said there, the injury crisis really hit you because who is there to step up? I mean, would you agree that any kind of problems that Burnley have are not because of the style that Dyche plays himself?
No, I think he does very well with the options he's got available to him. Obviously, not just the current owners, but going back probably 2-3 seasons now, we've not made a lot of transfers. I mean, we did qualify for Europe. We finished 7th in season 2017-18. We got into the qualifying stages of the Europa League. And I look back, the first game we played against was against Aberdeen, and that was just over 3 years ago. And the majority of that team, I think it was 7 or 8 of the players in that starting 11 who played the first match at Aberdeen, are still at the club and still first team regulars. So it's not like we've come in and we've had a lot of progression from that and had turnover and had players coming in and improving the team and moving things on. We are still reliant on that same core of players that we had 3 years ago. So it's been a accumulation of multiple transfer windows where I think we've underinvested, but we have still, well, thanks to Sean Dyche, I think to a large extent, we've kept in there in the Premier League when we've had another top half finish since then as well. So last year wasn't quite as good. It was difficult for everyone with the circumstances last year with COVID. We'll see how that transpires into a new season with fans back in the ground.
Now, one of the players, I think every season he just looks so brilliant, is Pope. He was wonderful once again last season, third highest XG prevented of any goalkeeper, only behind Martinez and Alisson. But kind of going into this season, you've talked about it there, he was injured towards the end of last season, and the XG prevented went into the kind of minus numbers there. It was a really bad run that happened there. Do you think that the team is a little bit over-reliant on him, or do you think that Wayne Hennessey is actually a really good backup to kind of cover that position now?
Wayne Hennessey is a really good keeper. He's very experienced. I think he's had 90-odd caps for Wales, hasn't he? So he comes into the squad with that in mind, I think, more than anything else. And obviously Bailey Peacock-Farrell's gone out for a loan. I think he needs some game time, and he's going to get that this season with Sheffield Wednesday. I think it's not just Nick Pope, though. I think it's that three. So we've got Nick Pope, and then immediately in front of him, you've got Ben Mee and you've got James Tarkowski. I think as a Burnley fan, when you've got those three players playing, there is confidence. That's almost like the core of the team, if you will. And I think with the other options around, I think you're always confident that we can go on and get results, not every week, but in terms of averaging out, we'll get results. I think when those one or other of those players aren't available, it becomes more difficult. And we have seen that, particularly the start and the end of last season, that did come to bear when we were missing one or more of those players in the team.
So that kind of nicely brings me on to my next question. Was last year we did see a big drop off in the steely defensive abilities of the team. The season before, you managed to get 15 clean sheets, mid-table defensive data. Last season, not really near that at all. What do you think went wrong last season, and is that going to be fixed this season?
Well, as I say, I think it was the availability, the fact that we didn't have those players available at the start of the season. We got off to a really, really poor start. The players that came in were not quite up to that level. We've seen players move on. We've got another player in now, Nathan Collins, who's a younger player from Stoke. We've outlaid a little bit more money on him. I think they see him potentially as a future replacement for James Tarkowski. He's only got 1 year left on his contract, so it looks like more or less that's going to run down, and then more than likely he's going to move on at the end of the season. I don't think there's going to, unless there's a silly money offer in before the window. You never know. But yeah, I think that's sort of a future-proof move to get him in. But I think the squad has aged quite a bit, and we do need to make up for lost time in some ways in terms of the transfer windows where we've not invested. And Sean Dyche can only work miracles for so long. He does need the support. I think he was very frustrated the back end, not of last season, the season before. I don't think that's come across quite as much in his interviews since then, but I think it's one of those things that could potentially come to a head if the recruitment doesn't go the way that he wants it to.
So really, Burnley can only do so much, and signings is really where you need to kind of progress the club from.
Well, yeah, to some extent. I mean, I think there are players coming through the youth ranks now. I think we've improved that side of it. We've got more of a solid under-23s team. We've brought players in there. They've invested in the academy, so we've gone from a Cat 3 to a Cat 1 on the academy side, invested £10 million in a new state-of-the-art development on the site of the old setting, which is basically, it's in like a National Trust ground. It's like a hall in Padiham, which is 2 or 3 miles outside of Burnley. And they've invested all this money there, and it's, compared to what it was, it's absolutely fantastic. But that needs time to kind of get going and bring the players through. And I think maybe 2, 3, 4 years time, we will see the fruits of that, and we may see 1 or 2 before then. Obviously, Dwight McNeill's come through. He's a regular in the side. He's one of our attacking options. Well, in terms of reliance, I think we're a little bit too reliant on Dwight McNeill in terms of creating chances for goals. He was obviously doing that quite a lot last season and the season before. But we have got another couple of players coming through. I think the ones on the fringes who may get in. There's a 20-year-old French guy, Anthony Gomez, Mancini, midfielder, and also Lewis Richardson. He's only 18. He's a striker. So again, there are some options going through there. They've had some game time in pre-season. We may start to see them getting involved as the season goes on.
Well, that brings me nicely, kind of segues me talking about Dwight McNeill, about probably the biggest problem. I don't know if you agree with me on this, but last season was the inability really for the team to score goals. You weren't really creating enough chances, and in the end, only 33 goals scored in a Premier League season. The side had, not enough chances created from quite a few areas on the pitch, and it was coming from Ashley Westwood and from Dwight McNeill himself, who ended with 9 assists over the course of the season. Is this something that has been worked on in pre-season, maybe switching up the play just a little bit so that somebody like Wood can get onto more chances, or do you have a little bit of worries going into this season because it's a personnel problem?
I think there's a little bit of that. I think, well, we've missed Chris Wood in pre-season. He's been away with the New Zealand team. He's been playing in the Olympics out in Tokyo. Obviously, New Zealand have been knocked out now. I think he's back in training on Thursday. So I think the intention is he'll be back in the team. He'll be ready for the first game against Brighton, but he's not had a chance to gel in the pre-season matches. Plus, I don't think you can read too much into pre-season. We tend to play lower league sides. We did play Newcastle earlier this week, won 1-0 in a behind closed doors game, but the other games have all been against lower league opposition. And then we're playing Cadiz, Spanish team, La Liga team, on Saturday. So that might tell you a little bit more. I think certainly in terms of the game at the weekend, the previous match we played over at Tranmere, I think we kept the back 5 and kept them playing, I think, pretty much all the game. And I think that's what Sean Dyche likes to do as the season goes on, likes to get, he'll give players 45 minutes here, 45 minutes there, then it'll build to 60. And then as we get to the last 2 or 3 pre-season games, he'll be looking particularly for his defence to be set. So he'll try and get that 5. He didn't have that option last season with injuries. It was really difficult, and it sort of told us the start of the season and the run of results that we had, the first 6 or 7 games where we struggled to get very many points on the board. But I think for this season, touch wood, without any injuries so far, he'll be looking to get that back 5 effectively in there, playing certainly again at the weekend, and then the following weekend when we play Brighton, looking to have them in there and set. I think we can go into a season with a set back 5. That's a starting point. I think from Burnley's perspective, that's always a starting point. If you can do that and defend well, then you've got the options to build on that. And I think we have struggled a little bit, as you say, to score goals. But if you're defending well, you don't have to score quite as many goals. I don't think Burnley are ever going to score 50 or 60 goals a season, but you've got a player in Chris Wood who's been in double figures for the last 4 seasons. I think he'll be looking to match or better that again next season. And it's looking who can add to that. Ashley Barnes is playing again in pre-season. Matty Vidra's been out of the World Cup. And we've got Jay Rodriguez as well, and Lewis Richardson. So we've got some options in attack. We've not got we've not got a £100 million striker we can rely on, but Burnley aren't in that bracket in terms of who we can buy. So we have to make the most of what we've got. But I think there are some options there for Sean Dyche. I think perhaps a little bit more. He needs some help in midfield, some more. You mentioned Ashley Westwood. Ashley Westwood's maybe more from set pieces, whereas Dwight McNeill perhaps is a little bit more from crosses, etc. We need a little bit of an option maybe on the other side Johan Berg Gudmundsen's capable of doing that, but he's had his problems with injuries. I think we need another option really on the other side to compete maybe with Johan Berg Gudmundsen and maybe take a little bit of the pressure off Dwight McNeill.
So you've mentioned them there, set pieces, and like you said, Ashley Westwood is kind of really good at those dead ball situations. But the kind of potency that Burnley have had in yesteryear over the seasons, set pieces were kind of one of their go-tos for goal scoring opportunities. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when the goal scoring has gone down from that, the goal scoring has gone down across the whole of the team. Only 8 goals were scored from these last seasons. Do you think that was a bit of a statistical anomaly because you guys are normally so good at it? And do you think that the team will return to getting goals from dead ball situations next season? Or is there a problem with deliveries kind of going into this new season?
I think it's one of those where it can ebb and flow. As you say, you can have over a course of the season, you can be below average, and then that kind of rectifies itself the following season. I think you maybe need to get 9-10 games into the season and see how that's progressing, see if you're making some more chances from set pieces. I think we're capable of it. I think he's particularly from corner. I mean, he scored a couple of goals from corners, quite unusual. Doesn't happen very often. He scored one against Liverpool, and he also scored one against Southampton a couple of years ago as well. So I think in those situations, it's not just the fact, yes, he's scored from corners. There's other ones where the corners have gone in and the goalkeeper's kind of flapped at it, and it's been an own goal for the goalkeeper as well. So there is pressure in those situations. I think free kicks is one where we have struggled. I mean, I think we have to go back to Stephen Defoe the last time we scored direct from a free kick. So that's showing how long ago it was. I think it was over 4 years ago now since we scored direct from a free kick. So I mean, I know you don't always have to score direct from a free kick, and we do kind of get headers from free kicks that come into the box. But I think you've got that direct threat from free kicks as well. That's something else that can add to the armoury, put the doubts into the mind of the goalkeeper and the defenders. And that's perhaps something where we need to improve on and maybe get a player in who's a bit more capable on the set pieces.
So for now, if you were talking about Fantasy Premier League, you wouldn't get in a Burnley player like Ben Mee or Tarkowski to kind of jump on those set-piece situations. You'd leave that for the moment.
They're capable of scoring 1 or 2 goals, and they have done. I think the benefit you get with Burnley defenders is if they're there and they're fit, they'll be in the team. You don't get the Pep roulette effect, where he's mixing and matching your players. I mean, I don't bother picking any City players for my fantasy team now because it's a case of, well, who's he going to pick this week? He's got so many players open to him, and they'll play one week and not the other, and it's usually the week you don't pick that it happens. So it's one of those things really where I think that they are players who get decent points. You know, Tarkowski and me in the team get points of Burnley, and they're playing week in week out if they're fit. So they are certainly an option to have in your fantasy team.
I mean, the other point is there's almost a little bit of unluckiness with Burnley in set pieces last season as well, because they were top for XG from set plays. They were, I think, second top for XA. No, they're actually top again for XA from set plays. So maybe, again, kind of like what you're saying there, Ben Mee, Tarkowski have that ability, and you're saying that maybe bring in a player for that, but they might just return, kind of the word is regression to the mean. They could just return to that mean and start scoring those, because they should have probably scored more from those set-piece situations. So far, there's not been many signings for the club. Do you believe that this is kind of the area that you're going to see improvement? Or like you said, are there a few youth players that maybe the FPL community can look forward to this season?
As I mentioned already, there's a couple of players. Anthony Gomez Mancini, midfielder, who's been playing in pre-season. He's a midfielder. Lewis Richardson, who's a striker. And I guess it depends more on maybe availability of other players, whether they do get a chance to come into the side and get a decent run in there. We know even like the likes of Mate Vidra, who's been international footballer. He's come in and he's had limited chances. Although when he did get chances last season, he did come in and did get a few goals. So it's one of those things. I mean, it was like that with Dwight McNeill to some extent. It was a surprise when Dwight McNeill got into the team, going back what is it, 3-4 years ago now. He's still only quite young. He's still only 21. He was only 18 at the time. But he got a chance. He got into the team and he kept his place, and he's come on leaps and bounds from then really. And that does sometimes happen with youth players. It's not always a case of they're automatically in the team. You don't often have like a Wayne Rooney who's just going to come in and immediately get on in the team. Sometimes it's circumstances. So I might actually just see with that whether there is one or two of those players. But the benefit now is we have got players now on the fringe of it who are getting there, whereas in the past it's been a case of, well, we just had no one coming through the youth side at all. We had Jay Rodriguez in his first spell. That's going back to 2007-8, that kind of time, and then it maybe had 10 years where we weren't bringing anyone really through from the youth teams, whereas now the setup is there and the intention is bringing in players, perhaps some of them who have been released from other academies. I mean, that's Dwight Mcneill. He was at Manchester United as a 14-year-old, got released, came to Burnley's academy, and then he's moved on from there. So I think there's certainly an eye on that, trying to eye up maybe talent that's been rejected elsewhere but are capable of progressing. And these clubs, likes of Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, and the like, who have so many players, they do get disregarded quite often at a younger age, but then there is still potential going further forward. As they get 15, 16, 17, 18, and we've seen that with Dwight McNeil. I think the intention is to try and do that with other players as well.
So quite often when I start looking at a season ahead, I look at the last 9 games of the previous season as maybe an indicator of how a team might hit the ground running or have had difficulties. And obviously the data's not great reading for Burnley, who lost 7 out of their last 9 games. The data regressed from season-long trends in terms of defence. And what is quite interesting for me, as well as kind of looking at the data, is that Burnley tried, in terms of the data, it looks like they tried to almost pump up their attack, but that cost them defensively. So they were scoring more goals per game, they're having more shots inside the box per game, a higher XG per game, but then that negatively impacted the XG conceded per game. It negatively impacted big chances conceded per game. Does that kind of make you a little bit worried about the campaign ahead? Or do you think that this was a Burnley team that were kind of run ragged from a really long season, COVID affected, injuries? This was just kind of, they were safe, and that's basically mission accomplished.
I think that last part is key to it, really. The fact that we got ourselves safe with a few games to go, and then kind of, it's all about percentages. So even if you're dropping off 1 or 2% at that stage, and there is that kind of relief factor in there, that can reflect itself in performances and results. And I think that certainly happened to some extent at the end of last season. So I wouldn't read too much into Burnley's, well, certainly the last 5 or 6 games of the season. I know you've gone back a little bit further than that, but I wouldn't read too much into that. As I say, it's started a new season, it's a new slate, and I think we'll be going out there certainly with a more positive frame of mind, bearing in mind, at the moment, we don't seem to have too many injury problems. I mean, we went into last season, we had the injury problems in the last part of pre-season. At the moment, thankfully, it's all looking quite good, and there's not too many players out. We've got 1 or 2 minor injuries. Nick Pope is still a worry. He's not played yet in pre-season, so I think it might be difficult for him to start the first game. But I think the intention is he'll be ready to go and raring to go within a week or 2 of the season starting, and looking to get back into the team.
So where do you think the team will come next season?
I think realistically, I don't think we're going to be top half. I think we're going to be somewhere between 11th and I think we're going to be safe. So I'm going to say between 11th and 17th, but it can be such fine margins within there. We've seen before that, 4 or 5 points can separate the teams in those places. So I'm guessing 15th, 16th, with head rather than heart in terms of where we are at the moment. If we get more players in, who knows, maybe that might shift slightly. But I think with what we've got, I think that might be a more realistic reflection of where I think we're going to finish. And I think, Sean Dyche, we've mentioned already, in terms of the resource available to him, if he was to do that next season, I don't think there'd be too many complaints from Burnley fans. He has delivered a couple of top half Premier League finishes, but to do that with the squad he's got, I think would be a real miracle.
And what would constitute a successful season for Burnley going forward?
I think if we got top half, I mean, I say we've done it before. We've got top half. If we were able to do that, that would be a really successful season. It's always difficult. I mean, the amount of money involved. I mean, you're talking about £100 million transfers. Burnley are never going to be in that bracket. Our most expensive players. Well, they don't tend to release them these days in terms of the fees, but we're talking round about 15 million for our most expensive player, which quite a few Championship clubs are still paying that sort of money. So we're always fishing in a slightly different market in terms of the players we're looking to get in, even at that sort of level. And I don't think there's a mindset from the new owners that they're going to be splashing the cash. We're not going to be suddenly spending 40 or 50 million pound on a player. I'd be amazed if they might try and push it slightly. We'll see. But we're not going to be in the sort of spending the mega bucks. We don't have the massive multi-billionaire owners that a lot of the other clubs have got, but we have to work within our means. And as we said already, Sean Dyche does that remarkably well with the players that he's got.
Would a successful season as well be kind of, as you kind of talked through this whole discussion here, getting a few players in the door, building towards maybe not a successful 2021-22 season, but the seasons after that and after that, maybe some young players that really the team can be built around?
I think you always have to look forward. Yeah, I mean, I think we have had a couple of seasons where we've stayed still or gone backwards, and we've not had recruitment in the transfer windows. It's probably going to take at least maybe a couple of seasons to get ourselves back up. I mean, look at some of the players we have got now getting on towards their late 20s into their early 30s. They do tend to say it's kind of the players between 24 and 29 that are kind of at their peak. And you see the stats, don't you, in terms of the graphs in terms of where the players are. Ours are more at that other end. I think only Crystal Palace had an older team last season. So, there's certainly going to have to be some sort of change. I don't think Ben Mee's still going to be playing for Burnley when he's 40.
No, I think that would be quite a physical peak. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo wants to try it. Maybe, maybe he might end up at Burnley one day, but he's definitely trying it for Juventus. Final question for you, Dave, and it has been a pleasure to chat to you, but we do have to finish up. But I'm sure lots of people will be interested. If you could pick one player for FPL for the season from Burnley, who would it be and why?
Good question. I think Nick Pope will be the one I would choose. I mean, personally, I've sort of dallied with having Burnley players in there. I think a bit of false loyalty sometimes in terms of players I've brought in. But if I had to nail it and pick one player, then I would pick Nick Pope to be in my fantasy team and keep him there. I think he's reliable. If he's in the team and playing, touch wood when he's back fit again. Hopefully that's going to be early in the season. I think he's one player that you can rely on having in the team. And I think if you was to single out one, unlucky again to get the injury when he did and miss out on the World Cup. Miss out on the Euros. I think he certainly would have been in the squad, and who knows, he might have been pushing Jordan Pickford, who he had a really good Euros himself, didn't he? I think he maybe had one half a game where he looked a little bit dodgy, but the rest of the time he had a really good tournament. But Nick Pope would have been certainly out there in the matches, and is really unlucky to miss out. But I think from a Burnley perspective, he's the one player that you can rely on.
With Nick Pope as well, looking at him last season, even with that injury, even with the fact that the team weren't getting clean sheets, he averaged about 4.2 points per game, and there was only Martinez who actually scored more bonus points than him. So he's a bit of a bonus point magnet, and I think it's a good point that you're kind of raising. Just kind of adding to that then, do you think that Burnley are going to get more clean sheets this season and bump up those points from Pope?
I would hope we would improve on that this season. Yeah, I think the home form, we didn't have many clean sheets at home last season. I think with the fans back, that's certainly something we're going to improve on. I think that will make a difference. I think Turf Moor is a sort of ground where It does rely on the sort of closeness of the fans to the ground and the atmosphere that they generate. We know we saw some really strange results last season. I mean, Burnley winning away from home. We won at Liverpool for the first time in I don't know how long, since the 70s, and broke that 69 match run that they had. We won at the Emirates, um, which you won't forget. And we also won at Goodison. We had some really good wins away from home. The season before that as well, we won at Old Trafford. So, we have had those results away from home, but I think we have to focus on the home form. We have to get the results going at Turf Moor, get the clean sheets coming at Turf Moor. So, and that's the thing to look out for the season. I think we can certainly make, well, we'll need to make a big improvement on the home form for this season. I think if we have another season like that next year, I don't think we can rely on the same level of away form. I think then we'll be struggling down the bottom three, but the home form definitely needs to improve.
And this is the thing as well, kind of Burnley are predicated on a really good, hardy defence. And so if anywhere is going to be worked on, Dyche is going to concentrate on that, kind of getting that sorted for next season. But for now, Dave, it has, as always, been a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much for your time. Just to remind everybody, please do check out the No Nay Never podcast. Do check out Dave and his Twitter, because there's so much good essential information on there, but also I love the little facts as we discussed at the beginning. But for now, Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jason. It's been a pleasure.